Welcome to another episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm Audrey Kanata, operations lead here at the Digital Growth Institute. And today we're going to be discussing how your age today, or rather how old you were in 1994, is directly impacting how you're viewing the world and the decisions that you're making. But first, let me welcome James Robert Lay.
Audrey, it's great to see you. Great to share time with you as always.
As always, James Robert, before we get started talking or asking a very awkward question, which is how old you are, what is going well for you personally or professionally?
What is going well is my son had his track meet last night, and to see his progress that he's made year over year, a lot of growth. And he was very excited about his own growth, and to be able to measure that progress looking backwards really just makes me feel good about his mind, his mindset, and how he's perceiving that. Even though he didn't place first, he was like able to look back and said, you know what, I've improved this much, and then the next race I can be even better going forward.
That's awesome to hear. I always love hearing about how your children are accomplishing so much. So, James Robert, I have probably set in maybe 100 different conversations with you in the last, I don't know, maybe 3 to 6 months or even longer than that, where you've asked a very awkward question, a very uncomfortable question. And you always preface it with that, and it's always out of respect, but you've probably asked about 100 people how old they are. More specifically, how old they were in 1994. Take us back to 1994. What is significant about that? And for context, I will say, I'll answer, I was 7 in 1994, and I think you were probably what, 12?
13.
13?
Yeah, 12, 13, depending upon
Like 7, 8.
Yeah. And I've gotten really comfortable asking a very uncomfortable question to financial brand leaders. And we do this working with teams, whether it's a marketing team, a sales and lending team, a leadership team, even the board of directors. And the response that I get initially is squirming. You can see this is a very
Or calculating.
It's a very uncomfortable question because I'm taking people back to 94. And sometimes I have to do a little bit of math. But the reason that 94 is so important, and here we are, 2024, 30 years later, that was an inflection point in history. That was the year that the internet reached the mass consciousness of humanity. And the reason I say it reached the mass consciousness of humanity is because the internet was being talked about on the Today Show, is being written about in Time magazine. And you can go and watch a lot of, we'll call them quote unquote memes of how the internet was being perceived back then. It was this new thing. People weren't sure what it was, how it worked, how to send an email. It was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of questions. And I think when we reflect back, everything that we have experienced at a macro level over the past 30 years is going to be different based upon how old you were in 1994, if, and this is the big if now, if you were even alive back then.
Right. Right. So we've seen now there's almost this divide between these two different groups of people. And we're reading different articles and we're seeing these terms being thrown around. You've got digital natives and digital immigrants. Can you differentiate those two different groups of people so we can kind of figure out who belongs in what category and why? What's the significance?
Well, the cutoff year, whether or not you identify as a digital native or a digital immigrant, is 1989. And so digital immigrants are those that were born before 1989. And so there would be some quote unquote millennials that get thrown into that mix of a digital immigrant. There would also be some millennials that get thrown into the mix of a digital native, those born after 89. And a lot of this comes down to, once again, how you grew up and perceive the world through the lens of technology, the internet, mobile devices. My wife and I were actually having a very interesting conversation because, and I don't even think I've told you this yet, Ludwig has a cell phone.
I was going to say, let me guess. He either has one or he asked for one.
We got him an iPhone. Although, yeah, I know. Although I spent a good couple hours over the weekend stripping it down, locking
Dumbing
it
it
down.
down.
Yeah, and
Yep.
basically he has a dumb smartphone to the point to where the screen, I'm not kidding, the screen is black and white all the time on his
Wow.
phone. And we
Wow.
talked about why, and he goes, Dad, this is the best thing. He goes, thank you for like thinking about me and taking care of my mind, because we were talking about dopamine and everything. But a lot of this comes back to, once again, our relationship with technology, because our relationship with technology is going to directly impact how we view the world, how we shop, how we buy, how we interact, how we connect, how we communicate. And I've been studying this now for 21 years as a digital anthropologist. And the way that I look at this is through the lens of marketing, sales, technology, and then the wild card, the variable, it's human behavior. But I want to say that there's a big knowledge gap, if you will, within financial services, particularly for those who would be digital immigrants. There's a knowledge or perception gap when it comes to those who are now digital natives that are pushing, you know, 25, 26 years old. They're moving into their quote unquote prime banking years.
So now that we understand, the difference between the digital native and the digital immigrant, let's dig deeper into the significance of this. And I have a statistic here, and I'm sorry I don't have the source with me right now, but of Americans who have opened a new checking account so far, or this is in 2023, at the time of this study, so far in 2023, 72% of those who opened these new accounts, checking accounts specifically, were Gen Z or
Mm.
millennials.
So this actually came from a report from Ron Shevlin and the team over at Cornerstone Advisors. Why this is significant is because we have to go back almost a decade before. In 2014,
Hmm.
Viacom did a study that found at the time, so 9 years, think 2014 to 2023, 9 years is so prophetic. 3 out of 4 millennials said that they would be more excited, more energized about a quote unquote bank account coming from Google, Amazon, PayPal, Square, Apple, etc., than from their own bank. I remember, Audrey, vividly sharing that study in workshops, in keynote sessions. And I would say it was met with like, yeah, okay, whatever you say. It wasn't met with, we should be paying attention.
Right.
And here we are. Because in 2014, the internet was 20 years old. The iPhone came out 7 years before in 2014. Here we are in 2024, 10 years later. And at least when Cornerstone did the study, 73% of millennials, or those who opened checking accounts, were Gen Z and millennials. I think the deeper story is, where were they opening these accounts?
Yeah.
And it was the digital banks.
Right.
47%. 47% of all new checking accounts opened when the study was done in 2023. It's like 1 out of 2 were at digital banks or fintechs.
Why?
Perception. because those who grew up with the internet, those who grew up with the iPhone, the way they perceive the world is different than those digital immigrants
Maybe
who
even their expectations.
expectations correct. This is the whole idea that I'm writing about in Banking on Change. Perception is the sum of context and framing. And when we think about banking, quote unquote, the verb, the context of banking and even the frame of how we viewed banking and a banking experience is being informed by other digital retail experiences.
Right.
And it's fascinating that we're having this conversation because not only did Ludwig just get a dumb smartphone, a lockdown iPhone, he just got his first debit card too.
Wow. I know he's been making some money on the side. We have a little junior entrepreneur over in the Lay household.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do an experiment as 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 both a student and a digital anthropologist here. I opened up a debit card for him, not through a traditional financial brand, but through Venmo. I used my Venmo account to open up a debit card for my son tied to my Venmo account so that I have some oversight to it.
Mhm.
Took me less than 60 seconds. And I told my wife, this is the big underlying danger. This is the big underlying threat.
Quick, quick, quick.
Exactly. To the incumbent traditional financial brand. And you and I know this. We've conducted thousands
Yeah,
of
yeah.
website secret shopping studies. And the friction to open an account, because when did I do this? 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night. Because I was like, well, I could, go to my credit union. I could go to the community bank. I could go to the national bank. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something new, just as an experiment. Which reminds me, going now back to that 2014 study from Viacom that found 3 out of 4 millennials would be more excited about a new offering from Google, Amazon, Apple, PayPal, etc., than from their bank. I think it was in 2013 that we recorded and published the account opening process for Simple and for Movin'. And back then we recorded, and it was about a 3.5 minute account opening
Yeah.
experience. And the reason I ask, not only do I ask how old a financial brand leader was in 1994, another question that I often ask them: have you ever opened up an account or applied for a loan at a digital first brand?
Completely different experience.
Even now in 2024, the vast majority of responses that I get are no, I have not. And then I'm like, why? Sun Tzu, Art of War, thousands of years of wisdom here. Sun Tzu wrote, know thy enemy and know thyself, and you need not fear the result of 1,000 battles. When you think about a community financial brand or a credit union, and the leadership does not have awareness, does not have perspective into what is going on in the quote unquote real world, there's a knowledge gap, there's a perspective gap, and that is a threat to their future growth. So, if there's one thing that I can say, stop listening to this podcast right now and
Yep.
go open an account at a Chime or PayPal or Venmo and see what it feels like. Because the feelings and the emotions drive and influence the behavior far more than I would say anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I think, looking at these digital natives, like we said before, the perception, the expectation is quick, fast, instant. Um, and not to anyone's fault, anyone in particular's fault. It's just the way they were raised. They didn't have the experience of paper applications and going into the branch and I think that's just the reality of the situation that it's adapt or don't.
Well, I want to address that point because I do believe that there's another knowledge or perception gap here. That if you think, oh well, these digital natives, they don't want to come into a branch. Oh, these digital natives, they just want their app. They never want to talk to a human being. That's another fallacy as well. So there's a
Mhm.
bit of a paradox at play that just because a digital native thinks digital first doesn't mean they do not value or appreciate the human connection or expertise provided by a financial brand.
And I think that is evident. So if we kind of segue a little bit here, that is evident when we think about social media and the influence social media has on the digital natives. Where are they going to get their information? Where are they going to get, their experts, advice? It's on these social platforms because they want that human connection right there. I mean, can you break down? I think this is a word that's been thrown around a lot, but finfluencer. What
Finfluencer.
exactly is a finfluencer?
It's just the smashing of two words together, a financial influencer. Um, I want to pause on this point about social media because, once again, how old you were in 1994 is directly going to influence your perception of the social media world, quote unquote. Because we have to go back for some historical context here. I think it was 2004 that there was a guy out of Harvard who killed an early business model that I had. My friend and I, we built an early social network. He was going to Baylor University and he called me up and he said, "Hey, this whole bookstore thing, it's a bad deal for students." I'm like, "Yeah, you buy a book for 150 bucks and then they buy it back for 10." And so we didn't know what we were doing at the time. We were just solving a problem. And so we built a platform called Bear Swap, and it was decentralization. We were bypassing the bookstore, connecting students with students. It was a peer to peer network that students could connect with each other through the Bear Swap website. And the connection was basically you could post a phone number, post the book, post an email address, and hook up that way to transfer your book. We found that they were swapping a whole lot more than books, furniture, video games, etc. But I saw the power of really early quote unquote digital community. And of course, Zuckerberg launches Face Mash, which becomes the Facebook, which became Facebook, which is now owned by Meta. And, we see that whole thing. But we have to keep in mind that's just 20 years,
Yeah.
2024 to 2004. That's just a 20-year horizon line. And now, if I go back in my own mind, I was getting asked to go speak at conferences about social media 2008, 2009, 10, 11, 12, etc. And it was this whole new way of thinking. The thing that I'm observing, the patterns that I'm observing is financial brands, while they were very, particularly leadership teams, were very hesitant to enter into the social media game back in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14 even. They're now operating in the present day like it's 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Just getting their feet wet.
Exactly. And what has happened is that the world has continued to transform and evolve, particularly for these digital natives that view social media as not this new thing. It's just the way that they connect. And my hypothesis is, particularly through complex buying journeys like financial services, buying a home, investing, people still trust people. People still will do business with people. It's just the ways and the mediums in which people connect. That's the transformation right there at a macro
And
level.
how much is it the type of content too? Um, you know, on social media, these finfluers generally, you're going to get these, short, digestible chunks, kind of simplified, dumbed down, definitions of things. What does that make? I mean, is that what this demographic is looking for, what they connect with, versus kind of how our parents had financial education or financial literacy when they were growing up?
Well, I mean, let's take the name Instagram. And you touched on this before when it came to like this idea of quick and now and easy and accessible. Instagram, Insta culture. Like I want it now. When you think about the complexity of money and the attention, I don't like, I hate that analogy of, oh, we have the attention span of a goldfish. Like it just, that's so tried. And I think it's more than that. I think, what value are you creating? Because we do live in an attention economy.
Right.
And the question is will people sit through a 30-minute, 45-minute presentation? Or are you more likely to influence behavior with 45 to 60-second shorts that make a positive deposit into the trust fund that sits between people's ears? And I think that's the key word, because you talked about finfluencers, financial influencers. You've heard me ask another question. So it's almost like there's three questions that we continuously are asking these financial brand teams. How old were you in 1994? Have you ever opened an account at a digital financial brand? And what is marketing?
That might be the hardest one.
Because whenever you, and you've seen this, whenever I ask these teams what marketing, and these are marketing teams too,
Mhm.
whenever I ask marketing teams, well, what is marketing? And they come back with
Right.
all of the tactical stuff, ads and emails and social media. And I'm like, those are great. But if you had to define marketing in one word, what is that? And then you're kind of just met with this uncomfortable blank stare. And I let the silence sit for just a little bit to, let people ponder. Marketing is influence. At the most basic core, marketing is communication that influences behavior. And when you look at some of the research, 90% of people that follow a finfluencer have changed at least one of their financial behaviors. Compare that to what incumbent financial brands are doing through their communication and social media dialogue.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is also pretty unique about this demographic, and honestly, I've myself have started to trend a little bit more this way, is using these platforms as our new search tool.
Mm.
It's our new Google. So if I want information, depending on how I want to consume that content, we can go straight to the platform to find our answers. And so I think that is something too. And when you get down into the rabbit hole, I know for TikTok and on Instagram, algorithm plays into it, and so you're getting served up content based on what you're viewing. I think that's something else to note is they're spending a lot of time on these platforms.
Well, I think about a senior vice president of marketing that we've worked with over the years. She reached out to me and she was asking me about this. She she was like, "James Robert, what's the deal? We're putting out the same type of content that these finfluencers are putting out, but we're not getting any traction." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you're putting it out from your brand. You're communicating from a brand and not an individual." See, this is the whole point of digital anthropology. You're studying this through the lens of marketing, sales, technology, and once again, the wild card is human behavior. And back to the point of you being aware of yourself and your behaviors and how your behaviors have changed over time. We know Google searches are trending down. Social searches are trending up. And we have to remember, what are people looking for? When it comes to money, people look for two things. Number one, they're looking for help. Number two, they're looking for hope. Hope has to come before help. I want to pull in some research here from a keynote that I did. This came from Forbes. 79% of Americans representing the millennial or Gen Z age group have found financial advice on social media. 76% within the millennial Gen Z age group believe financial content on social media has made it less taboo to talk about money. The two most trusted, because you mentioned TikTok, it's definitely not, I would say, one of the most trusted sources. NASDAQ report found 55% of TikTok users go there for financial advice because why? To your point, it's easy, it's digestible, it's bite size. 41% of TikTok users fact check the advice they get through the app. And I hear financial brand leaders push back. Well, we're not going to get on TikTok for a variety of reasons. Where are the people? Where's your future? Is there a cognitive bias that's standing in the way of you providing help, of you providing hope? The two most trusted sources for those looking for help and hope when it comes to finances, and a lot of leaders are surprised with this, it's YouTube and it's Reddit. And the question once again is, are you there? Are you with the people? Are you meeting people where they are at in a digital world? And if you're not, how much of that is because of how old you were in 1994?
Okay, this is we're all coming full circle here, James Robert. So this is a great place to start to wrap up. We identified in this conversation that nearly half of all new checking accounts opened in 2023 at the time were digital banks and fintechs. And we know that of those, 72% are Gen Z and millennials. So we have the data. What is one practical next step action item that someone watching or listening can take knowing this information, knowing these numbers?
We have to look for ways to meet people where they're at. To come out from behind our ivory towers, to get into the community, to get into the streets and just to start having some real conversations. And the community in the streets isn't in the physical sense. And that's going to
Right.
require training. That's going to require education for leaders, for lenders, for branch managers, for advisors, because even a digital native isn't looking for 100% pure digital brand experience. They do value the expertise. You're seeing that. Who's filling the gap of that right now are the quote unquote finfluencers. So either A, you partner with and collaborate with the finfluencer because they've already built that level of trust in the marketplace, or B, you make the investment into your leaders, lenders, and advisors that you have today to begin to make deposits into the trust fund of people in the communities that you're serving, to connect with them in a completely different way. It's more conversation based, it's more dialogue based. And then, oh, I can hear it right now, James Robert. Oh, what about regulations? Well, of course, you have to play within the regulatory world. So we have to be very mindful of how we do this. This needs a plan. This needs a strategy. This needs oversight. But to just sit on the sidelines and do nothing because of
Yeah.
fear, it's there will be no progress that is made. And there will be brands, whether they are finfluencers, fintech, that continue to fill the void for a generation that perceives the world differently. And it's not about right, it's not about wrong. Experience shapes reality. And those and how old you were in 1994 is directly influencing how we all perceive the world right now.
I love the way that you frame that. It's not right. It's not wrong. It just is what it is. So meet people where they're at, listen, have conversations. James Robert, thank you so much for this episode and sharing your time with us today.
Absolutely, Audrey. It's always fun to share and to help others be even better together.